You wrote in your book, page 216, my entire career, indeed my entire life, has been based on trying to break down the walls between people of all colors throughout the world. I've lived that. Tell us how you've tried to break down those walls in music and just some of the obstacles you faced, some of the moments where you felt like you were actually living it.
Oh my God. That's a big question, the breaking down walls. Give me a minute on that.
Okay,
Because
we'll
that's wait a minute. That's I mean, it's hard to recall real quick.
You do it in so many different areas. Let's start with Hollywood. You have an amazing story about when you show up in Hollywood.
Okay.
So, what was your experience like breaking down barriers in
Well,
Hollywood?
my first encounter with Hollywood was after 2 years after I finished my first movie. I wanted to do movies since I was 15 years old. I was absolutely obsessed with doing film scores. I don't know why. It just something appealed to me, and we used to play hooky in Seattle and identify Alfred Newman, etc. And after the pawnbroker, I said, okay, this is, at 30 years old, I finally got my break. Sidney Lumet gave me the break. Now it's going to start rolling. Nothing. And finally, got a call from my agent, and they said, we've got a picture with Gregory Peck and Walter Matthau called Mirage. And I got my best Italian suit out and got out to California. And the producers were shocked when I walked in because they were unaware that I was black at the time. And I mean, you could see it. It was very obvious. And so they said, we'll be right back after the shock. And they called Henry Mancini, who was a very good friend of mine. And he said, guys, get into the 20th century. You know, he's studied with Nadia Boulanger, et cetera, and has always been supportive. And don't worry about him writing blues for Gregory Peck, but it might be a good idea. Gregory said it might be a good idea. But that, you know, what it is I find the longer you live, it's about stereotypes and preconceived ideas. And people that don't get around each other never get to know each other. And that's my remedy for trying to cure some of the things is just getting people together so they can know each other. So he's not a bad guy, but you know. And I've heard lines in my life many times. Oh, but you're not really black. I said, yes, I am, really black. And because you can't pull people out and say this is an exception because of whatever it is, you know. And I feel the same way. To me, I don't know what the big deal is about talking about women. Like everybody's so liberal with hiring a woman for it. What are they talking about? I mean, please, Melba Liston and Hazel Scott and all of the great ladies in my own band and everything else. Who ever thought twice about that? You know, it's the basic thing is that people can play. So if Phil Woods is in the band and Melba Liston, I don't get it. I never did get it. And I wasn't aware that so many people were conscious about that. And I heard a lot of stories, even from Artie Shaw used to tell me stories about how difficult it was with Lena when they first went to the South. And even in the Charlie Parker story, it was almost a parody when they tried to talk about how they got away with taking Red Rodney down to the South in Clint Eastwood's film. And they called him an albino blues singer, Albino Red. It was really funny to realize that it had to get that ludicrous.
You toured the South with Hamp, didn't you? Tell me about, do you remember moments where, you know, you guys literally couldn't get food to eat or had trouble with hotel rooms, that sort of thing? I mean, you lived that and you brought that with you, didn't you?
Well, yes, I did. And the strange part of it was when I was 10 years old, my father took me out of Chicago. We lived in the biggest ghetto in America, which is Chicago ghetto. And we almost didn't see white people. I didn't see white people until I was 10 years old. And we took a trailway bus out to Seattle, to Bremerton during the war, World War III in 1943. And I remember the bus stopped in Idaho, and everybody went in the restaurant. We couldn't go in the restaurant. We had to go to some black homes on the other side of town to eat. But at 10 years old, you still don't get it. And so by the time we got to Seattle, this is the total opposite of of what Chicago was about, because we were like the first black kids in Bremerton. So that was an experience too, because not really knowing what racial bigotry was about, that's when we got our indoctrination. Was in the Northwest. On both sides, people that didn't care and people that had very strong views about separate races.
Now in Chicago, we explored you told these amazing stories about your family. Paint that moment for us once again, that incredible, important moment in your life where you find music and how it changes your life and replaces things that you need in Bremerton.
Yes, it was Bremerton where I think I hit the wall with the crossroads. Because coming out of Chicago, you're totally oriented, gang-oriented. You really are, in every sense of the word. Chicago's probably the best spawning ground of the best gangsters of every race and religion in the world. And we saw control of territories and that mentality since we were kids. And so when we got to Bremerton, my brothers and I, we said, okay, that's what we do. We run this territory. It wasn't a very big territory. And we got into a situation. I lost my point. I'm sorry.
The armory.
Okay, yeah, okay.
No, that's fine. Let's just reframe a little bit.
Pick up there?
Just move him a little bit more center. Okay,
so after this whole life of thuggery, it was just a way of life, just what everybody did, and there was no other way. A lot of idle time. And one night we decided, okay, the Armory is the recreation center. Let's hit that one up tonight. We've got all the grocery stores and everything already. Let's get to the Armory tonight, because that had a lot of interesting goodies. It was really an adventure and prowling around. And so we broke into the Armory, and we found lemon meringue pie and ice cream, which was delicious. And after we ate all we could, we started to have pie fights and everything. And everybody sort of individually went off to explore to see what other room they could break into. And I found one room and broke into it, and it was like an administration room. And I opened the door, and over there in the shadows was a little spin piano. And that was just some very abstract thing to me at the time. I knew a lady next door to me that played piano, but I never thought about being connected with it. And I almost closed the door and left, and then I went back in and just went over to the piano and ran my fingers over the keyboard. And from that moment on, I decided there was no more switchblades, no more guns, no more football, no more sports or anything. That was it. And that moment in my life, I could feel that was a commitment the rest of my life. That music would be it forever. I can't drive a car, anything else, but music was it. And it started there, and it's never ended, thank God.
Great, thank you. The other interesting thing is that it wasn't one particular music early on in Bremerton that you embraced. Give us a sense of how, even though it's out in Seattle, which at the time feels, in that period in history, feels like it's out, where is Seattle? It's not a major center. It's a place where bands tour through, and you pick up lots of different kinds of music.
Well, you have to understand, at the time we were in Bremerton, 43, and Seattle, the Northwest was probably one of the hottest centers in America for music because of all the armed forces, the Navy, Marines, Air Force, and Army. And everybody shipped off from there to what they call as Pacific Theater, I think, to go to Japan, because this was right in the heat of the war. And it was a kind of a situation of just where it was such a cross-section of people. We played, for instance, our typical night would be a nightclub, a tennis club, the Seattle Tennis Club, where it's a pure, upper-class dinner club, where we played white cardigans and bow ties and so forth, and cup mutes. We'd play songs like A Room Full of Roses and To Each His Own and all those things, whatever the hit parade was in the 40s, mid-40s. At 10 o'clock, we'd shift drastically, change costumes, and we'd go to the Rocking Chair and the Black and Tan, Washington Educational and Social Club, which is a really funny title for the club, like that club, what it really was. and play hardcore rhythm and blues and play for strip teasers and do Roy Milton things, Louis Jordan stuff, and dancers and do comedy. We had a comedy team, the trombone player and I, and about 2 o'clock we were through there, and we'd go get more put relaxed clothes on and go down to to the Elks Club on Jackson Avenue, which is a red light district, and play bebop all night for nothing. I mean, that was it, because everybody that came through town, Dizzy or Basie with Clark Terry and these people, they'd all come down there, and that's what would happen. And Ray Charles, when I was 14, I was down there one night, and this new kid came in from Florida, and it was Ray Charles. We called him RC, and eventually 6'9". To this day, we call each other by number. He's 6'9", and I'm 7'0", because it's easy identification. You don't have to say, "Hey, Ray, it's me." You know, it's and that's a relationship I cherish very much, because we used to dream back in those days about symphony orchestra work and movies and all kinds of things. And girls, and we did it all together. You know, from his albums to In the Heat of the Night, and to the Houston Symphony, we did a Black Requiem, and We the World, everything, and it's a very treasured relationship to me. But we had to play everything. In school we played Sousa, and you played classical music and Debussy on the job sometimes. Ray Charles would play Debussy on some of the jobs, and we had to play Big Fat Butterfly, parody on Poor Butterfly. You had to play absolutely everything. Schottisches, and I love it, because in the beginning we were so hip. We really wanted just being hip was it. You know, we heard about what was happening in New York, and you have to realize there wasn't the kind of communication. There was no MTV. You couldn't actually see it, so you had to imagine what being hip was about. And so you overdo it a little bit. Small town guys always overdo it being hip. They still do. And we would try to make the Schottisches sound like Charlie Parker and Miles Davis. And Ray would say, "Hey, man, come on, let's be real to the soul of the music and go straight to the soul of it." And that's why I learned that in a very dramatic way, how to really be involved with the soul that initially created the music, and to be flexible enough to move from one area to another. And so a lot of the people that when we did Michael Jackson, used to talk about selling out. I said, "What are you talking about? I did this all my life. It's not a stretch. No music was a stretch then, because we played everything."
What did? I'm sorry. Yeah. Quincy, it seems like your jack is hiking up. What is the jacket?
Broadcast news.
Okay.
I'm trying to make these shorter, man,
These
but it's Jesus, it's so much stuff.
I know, and I'll do my best to...
I'm trying to shorten them, really.
No, you're doing great. One thing I don't want to miss before we move away from your childhood with Ray Charles is, I know, beyond simply playing with him and whatever, he taught you about music in some way.
Yes, he did.
Let's just hang on until the camera's ready, but then, again, a little bit more center, if you would. Yeah. Great. Yeah. What did 6ix9ine teach you?
Ray Charles, when he first came to Seattle, I mean, in every way, the difference between a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, with Ray, it felt like it was 30 years between, because he was so mature and growing up. Number one, you have to understand that he had his girlfriend, he had an apartment, he had a record player. It was amazing. 2 suits, everything. And this was, 14-year-old kid. I said, "Man, how do you do that?" So I used to worry him to death and wake him up all the time. "What do you want now, man?" And because he knew, he had sight till he was 7, so he understood musical notation. And I was as thirsty and hungry as anybody that ever lived to learn. And Ray would teach me in Braille, notations and so forth. He knew exactly what a dotted eighth and 16th was, and we'd sit down and write arrangements on things like Emanon, Dizzy Gillespie's tunes, and we'd play those with our junior band with Bumps Blackwell. Bumps Blackwell eventually took over our band, Charlie Taylor Band, and made it to Bumps Blackwell Jr. Band. Bumps also was a guy that discovered Little Richard and Sam Cooke. And he was played an enormous role in our lives. And we were very fortunate. He got us to focus on discipline and rehearsing and really getting our thing together. We were pretty tight for 14-year-old kids. We really had a hot band. Buddy Catlett was the real musician in the band. But we all were good section players and everything else, and I could write a little bit. And so Cab Calloway would come through. That's where I first met Milt Hinton and Jonah Jones. They were all with Cab Calloway's band. And we opened for Cab, and we danced, sang, we had vocal groups and everything, and then we played for Billie Holiday when she came through, was 15, and Bobby Tucker was the musical director. And the next year he came back, and on Billie Holiday's thing, we were so busy gawking, and we were so in awe of her, we almost didn't play. And Bobby said, look, guys, get busy, if you're going to sit there and gawk all night, go get a ticket, because we just couldn't believe we were playing with her. And the next year he came back, and he was with Billy Eckstine. We played with Billy Eckstine. So we were feeling pretty confident about our abilities at that time.
What did those guys who came through, the Bassies, the Billy Eckstine bands, represent for you? You said earlier there was no, there's no MTV. It's not like you are going to plug into what's happening elsewhere. When these guys came to town, for you, what do they mean?
The traveling, black big bands that came through, and the white ones too, and the blues bands from California, when they came through, we had no other communication. So when they came through, they were a microcosm of the world, and they were guiding lights because, as I said before, there's no MTV, there's nothing to bounce your identity off of. They had nothing about black people in books up there. Maybe an occasional Booker T. Washington or George Washington Carver, but radio had a lot to do with my imagination, though, because outside of the stereotypical things like Beulah and Rochester had a lot of attitude, though. I liked Rochester. He would jump in Jack Benny's face a lot, and Amos and Andy were white, so the only outside contact we got with who do you want to be when you grow up, and what kind of principles do you hold on to? What is dignity and pride? How does that manifest itself? And these are the bands that define that for us. They'd come through and they were jovial and they were unified and tight. Sometimes they have fights in bands, but for the most part, the guys were tight and fun. I don't know. I just to look at them, it's just like go gaga, because they were so, Bobby Platers and Clark Terry's would come through, and they were so together and fun and dignified and proud and talented and confident, and it was, I said, that's the family I want to be in. I mean, I'm that between the piano the first time and that, it helped me make up my mind. I said, man, this is the only thing that there is to do. And as I said about radio before, television spells everything out, and videos more than ever. You used to be able to listen to a song and create your own images. Now they tell you what you're supposed to see. And I'm not sure whether I think radio's better, because radio, I could imagine a Green Hornet being anybody, or the Shadow, I Love a Mystery, and all those things. That Good and Blondie, I couldn't play around with that much. It was, I thought it was a great stimulant to my imagination. Amazing, because I had a wild imagination anyway, and radio helped a lot.
You mentioned, and let's creep in a little bit now, you mentioned Clark Terry in passing there. Tell us what attracted you to him. I'm just waiting on a siren that's cruising Fifth Avenue. And then ultimately what he taught you.
Well, what used to happen, we played hooky a lot, because, I was lucky that I had a music teacher named Parker Cook that understood whenever I defected, he knew it was for a good reason, because it was something that was about a direction I was very passionate about. Even nightclubs, he'd turn the other way when I'd come in at 11 o'clock after playing nightclubs until 5 in the morning at a very early age. And So we used to go down to there were certain places like the Palomar Theater where everybody came through, Mel Torme and Sammy Davis Jr., the Will Master Trio, and Billy Eckstein. And I was just like glued. I'd sit downstairs backstage and look through the orchestra pits to just see the fingers of the piano players and the conductor in action. And I'd just eat it all up. And they'd come off, and they were, I guess it's the reason that I have such a connection with young people that are coming up now, because so many people were so kind to me when I was young. They really were. Some did not want to know about it because we got in the way of their social life. It's because kids are very demanding. But Sammy Davis said he'd have earphones. He'd play his bongos with his earphones with his T-shirt on between shows. And he had Lemon Drop. He had Bertha the Cool with Miles Davis and all this stuff. And when Basie came through, he had a small band because he, basically liked to jiggle the molecules a little bit, and he'd like to play the ponies. And his band, he had to cut down because he wasn't doing so well. And so he had 4 horns, the rhythm section, and he had Buddy DeFranco, Serge Shelloff, and Wardell Gray and Clark Terry. And the first time I heard Clark, he was with Charlie Barnett, and I almost had a heart attack. I didn't think anybody could play like him. And to me, Clark Terry is still the greatest trumpet player that ever lived, with Clifford Brown. And I know Miles Davis was from East St. Louis, and he wanted to play with him too. But Clark, we connected, and I said, Mr. Terry, I'd like to hang out with you and ask you some questions and so forth. And he was very receptive to that. And he said, let me see you play. And I used to play high notes. I'd put my mouthpiece down here. And if I played too high, my lip would bleed. And he said, no, you got to put it up here so it's got more reinforcement. So correcting an armature is what you really say. And that's another relationship that never stopped. He was patient with me then when I was learning how to write and everything else. And I guess 6 years or so later, I was writing for Basie. And 6 years after that, Clark Terry left Duke's band to come with my band. And I mean, that's probably one of the highest musical moments in my life when he and Quentin Jackson came from Duke's band when we were in Paris in 1959. But Clark is I mean, to this day, Clark's 80 years old. To this day, there's not a trumpet player can touch him. He hasn't changed.
Looking forward to filming him out in the Hamptons next week.
Oh yes.
So we're working that one.
Well, that's going to be great.
Oh yeah, that's going to be terrific. I'm going to jump briefly over Hampton and Basie a little bit because you mentioned Paris, and if you would pick us up on the train on the way to Paris the first time you come in, and what it represents to you. Because it's an unbelievable moment.
Yes, it was. I'll never forget that as long as I live. We had just been to Sweden, and we bought overcoats. Had a brand new overcoat on and a Tyrolean hat, and with Clifford Brown one day. And so we're coming from Switzerland, and we're on a train, and I couldn't sleep, so I just got up and got dressed, and went out in the back of the train. And it was about 5 or 5:30 in the morning. And as we came closer to Paris, the sunrise was coming up. And to see Paris like that for the first time, and you come in, there's a silhouette of all the landmarks, the Eiffel Tower, and there's some smell of coffee and whatever it was. And I've never experienced anything like that in my whole life. I didn't know what it was. We came into the train station in the Palais d'Orsay, which is now a museum. And we came in at that train station. We stayed at the hotel at Palais d'Orsay. And we didn't have any money, so the 4 or 5 of us used to stay together. But I later found out that it was from, the connection went way back, it's a long story, to Nicholas Lanier, who were court musicians back there. But I could feel Ravel and all of the people in it with the French music. There was just something about that place. And then we saw all the expatriates there, like Kenny Clark and Don Byas and everybody was over there then. Richard Wright, it was just amazing. And the 50s were probably, and you know, it's hard to realize because America's never had its shores invaded like that. But you could tell this was a city that had just come out of Nazi occupation, and there was joy. I mean, they were celebrating. They really were. And everybody, the jazz clubs and Big Chief Moore and all these, Henry Red Allen, all these people, I had never seen anything like it in my life. And it was just, somehow I could focus on my past, present, and future because the whole black and white thing was off your back. You could feel that off your back right away. Well, I guess in Europe it's because the Cypriots are giving a hard time to the Greeks and the Armenians and the Turks and the Swedes, the Danes and everything, so they didn't have time to bother with brothers, you know. So we were pretty loose and free, and it's just you were just taken at face value, and it just had a great effect on my life, and I'm sure that's why I came back so many times to study with Nadia Boulanger. And
yeah, let's talk about that. You're there in Paris. It's later. What did you learn from who was she? Because most people, very quick adjustments. Most people, you know, who aren't musically oriented won't necessarily know offhand who she is.
That's true.
But give us a sense of just how eminent she was, and what did she teach you?
Okay.
Hang on, are you all set, Nardi? Yeah. Okay, good.
I need to preface that to Nadia Boulanger by saying that we would on a State Department trip with Dizzy Gillespie's band in South America.
Let's start with that.
Okay.
You get a call. Part of the thing is, you make a point of, you get the call. Here's one of Eminon. Here's your hero. What are you asked to do, and what is that experience with Dizzy in '56?
In 1956, I had done a few record sessions with Dizzy as a sideman. I was scuffling in New York and getting a little bit more well-known there. And two things happened. George Avakian at Columbia Records said, I've heard some of your records. I'd like you to do a jazz record with a track jumper we have from San Francisco. He's 17 years old. And he gave me the demo, and it was Caravan and some things like that. And I was involved in that for a minute. And then Dizzy called and said, I want you to organize the band, to write the arrangements and kind of design the show, and be the musical director for my band. And so I had to jump ship, and I told George, I love your singer, but I don't think I can do the project, and I gave him the tapes back, who eventually turned out to be Johnny Mathis. And they did a jazz album with him first, and Gil Evans and the guys did the arrangements, and then Mitch Miller took him upstairs and did Chances Are and The 12th and Never. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we go overseas, and I put the band together, we rehearse and everything else, and we meet Dizzy. He's on a Jazz at the Philharmonic tour, and we meet Dizzy in Rome, and as we get off at the plane, Dizzy's there at the airport with his upright trumpet, and he's playing Sweet Lorraine because his wife was on the plane with us, and he did that to welcome her there. And that's another Wonderland kind of a tour, to be with your idol like that, and also participating in the rehearsals and the formation of the band. And we traveled all over the Middle East, and in a way we were kind of a kamikaze band because, you know, Adam Clayton Powell asked him to do this tour through the government. It was one of the first State Department tours. So we went to all the trouble spots, man, where there were landmines and the Cypriots are stoning the embassy. They said, okay, hurry up and get Dizzy's band over there. And we played in Athens that night, and we'd just heard about all of these problems with the riots the day before. And after we finished the concert, they rushed the stage. I said, oh, this is it, man. This is what we were worried about. The same students rushed the stage, and they grabbed Dizzy, and we freaked. And they put him on their shoulder. You know, it was like a hero. Dizzy, Dizzy. And it was amazing. We went in the airport and coming into Beirut. And you have to imagine the kids, I was like 23 or something like that, 23 years old. And you come into Beirut and places like Damascus, Syria, that, you know, it's like a Mars somewhere. American Air Force plane comes in next to us. Is John Foster Dulles. And we say, wow, look at that, you know. And it's 3,000 people at the airport. I said, look at that reception. It's a 6-day war. He was going to Israel or something. And it turns out all of the people there for Dizzy. And the concerts, the American emissaries there thought Dizzy was Dizzy Dean, the baseball player. They didn't have a clue. And, you know, Pakistan and all those places. Turkey, I met Arif Mardin in Ankara, Turkey. And he eventually came over to be part of Atlantic Records and so forth. There's no experience in the world like that. None. Greece, Turkey,
South America,
Iran, yes, and that's right. And back to so they were very happy with what happened with us over there. They invited us to the White House Correspondents' Ball and sent us right back out to South America. Let's do some more. We go straight to Buenos Aires, where we go to a nightclub after one of the shows, and there's a young kid in there with an 8-piece band who sees Dizzy and levitates, Lalo Schifrin. And he calls his big band, has the owner throw all the people out of the club, calls his big band together. They do a concert for us. And we all become very good friends. He tells us about a new movement that's happening in Rio called the Bossa Nova. It had another name then. And he tells us about Astor Piazzolla, this fantastic bandoneon player and composer who was writing the modern jazz tango then. And we became friends with him, and Dizzy recorded with him. We go to Rio, and the first day they interview us and ask Benny Golson, who's my roommate, what do we like to see in Brazil? And they thought it would be the Sugarloaf. We said, we want to see Villa-Lobos. And guess what? The next day, there's a note in our mailbox at the hotel. Mr. Lobos would like you guys to come over for lunch the next day. With, I think it was Father Crowley, was a priest, and Benny and I went over. And that's another, like being on another planet to meet somebody like Villa-Lobos. So he told us that Big Cigar, he said, see the books in that other room, that's all European music history and so forth. He said, they have closed those books. These guys leave fugue and counterpoint alone. Forget it. Bach has done it, very thoroughly. Impressionism or serial music or decaphonic music is done. He says, if I was 21 years old, I'd be right in Birdland with you guys. And he took us out to the places like Scola de Samba to see the incredible rhythm sections. Because Brazil is one of the most musical countries in the world. And Vinicius de Moraes and Dorival Caymmi and all these incredible people. And I got to tell you, I've got 7 kids. I'd take any of them out 2 years out of a university to get them to have that experience, because there's nothing like that. People used to tell me, you go into a country through the food, the language, and the music. And it's so true, because they can't pretend with that. The food is, where do the people here eat, What do they listen to? That's the stuff, If it's feijoada and it's batucada dancing, it's whatever, the samba dancing, and Portuguese, it's all connected. It tastes like it looks. It's like onomatopoeia, it's amazing. And every country we did this. We'd learn the language, to taste the tristeza, chegar saudade, to just see what the soul was. That's how you feel the soul of every country. And it opens up your soul. And after a while, you go to Asia, you go to Europe, you go to Africa and everything else, and it transforms you as a human being.
That's great, because we can use that for you're traveling your whole life. You never
That's
stop
right.
traveling.
That's right.
Like,
Still doing it.
That's unbelievable. But I don't want to miss Nadia Boulanger.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So no. So who was she and what did she teach you?
Okay, during the same trip to South America, Lalo, who we've connected immediately. I mean, Lalo was he had everything going. It's just soul and technique, everything. And I've always loved that when you have soul and science, because all the great musicians, Bird, everybody had that. And so he mentions 2 names. He mentions Olivia Messiaen, and he mentions Nadia Boulanger. And when he mentioned her name, I'd never heard it before, but something inside of me started to hum. It's like his soul started to smile. And I don't know why. And it became almost like a quest. He said, this is Mademoiselle. They call her Mademoiselle over there. She is a very special lady. She's a friend of Ravel's. She's one of Stravinsky's mentors. He does everything he does, he brings to her. He's the first woman to conduct the New York Philharmonic. And she became like a little resident in my head. And one thing led to another. This was 1956, and so the Muses were on my side, and I got a call from Nicole Barclay in Paris about 8 months later saying that we would like you to come over to Paris to be musical director for Barclay Records. I said, and so all of that, in my mind, tied in with Nadia Boulanger, and I could get to learn to write for strings because New York, I was having a hard time getting past the brass section. And so I went over to Paris for 3 months. I stayed 4 years. And I went to Nadia Boulanger's residence in Rue Ballou, and you have to audition for her because, you know, Ravel brought Gershwin to her one time, you know, and she turned him down. She said, you know, he had this genius talent for songs, and to leave extended form alone. And, you know, she's just that kind of lady, you know. And so she said, yes, I'll take you on as a student. And I was absolutely thrilled. Michel Legrand was studying with her at the time, and Daniel Barenbaum, all those guys who went to school together at the same time. I think Philip Glass, too. But she taught Aaron Copland. Oh, she's just absolutely incredible lady that was like the grande dame of classical music. And she used to have my classes. She'd schedule it in the summertime at Fontainebleau, up the palace there, at the end of the day, so we could really get into it. Because I wasn't like, I would have been corrupted already. I'd been in nightclubs since I was 13 playing the blues, you know, so it was too late for me to get formalized. So I'd bring her over a great bottle of Beaujolais, and she loved American canned peaches. And so Mesro, we had a connection at the PX, and I'd bring her some canned peaches over, and we'd hang out at night while I got my lesson. And she'd talk about different things about, I played Charlie Parker for her. And she says, it's too late for me. I can't deal with that because it's improvisation. If it's improvisation, sometimes it's very good and sometimes it's very bad. She was very honest and straight and strong, you know. And we'd have these conversations all deep into the night sometimes about what her philosophy was about music and how melodies always will be king or queen of music, and the parameters, until you set parameters in composition and everything else, you know, you have no freedom at all. The more you restrict it, the more freedom you have, which was hard for a jazz player to accept, you know. But a lot of things, dozens of things she told me didn't make sense until sometimes 20 or 15 years later. And her spirit's still there with me. She's a powerful lady.
She pointed you to work on what kind of music?
She sent me back to home, to my roots. She said, all American students come over here to write the Great American Symphony. That's not what I came. I came over with her to get into analysis and orchestration and counterpoint and everything. And composition, really, is what do you think about? Because it's very personal. Composition is very personal. And she said, you have the greatest ore in the world in your own soil, you know, and that's the music that you should go concentrate on and bring up and try to enrich and put in other forms, because she pointed out that Bartók, because, you know, it's still talking about Hungarian folk music, and Hungarian folk music to Bartók, and I think every composer, all the Russian composers, it comes from the folk ore. And it develops, and they're taken on up from there. The Moldavian music that Stravinsky started with, you know, it's all from the soil first, and then it's taken to another place.
I realize we new tape. New tape. We block you in here if you need to use the band.
Like going to heaven, absolutely in heaven, because you have to understand that when they came through, all the bands that came through were great. You know, Ellington, Louis Armstrong. Jimmy Lunceford, Basie, Woody Herman, Stan Kenton. I was there, right there, eating every second of it up, just gobbling it up. But Hamp came through. Hamp had something else. Hamp actually was the first rock and roll band that ever happened, because Hamp went for the throat with that 2 and 4. he would pound it. He would pound until he had everybody totally mesmerized and nailed to the wall. And it was an amazing kind of a dichotomy because, on the other hand, he had all these incredible musicians. I mean, really hot musicians way back he had Mingus and Wes Montgomery and Fats Navarro. All those guys were in that band, and in the band I was with, it was Jimmy Cleveland and Benny Bailey and incredible musicians. And it was like a family. He had singers. He had Curly Hamner. He had 2 blues singers on the side. He had vocal groups. And it was everything, man. It was just like a big, traveling, jovial family. And musical and just great arrangements and everything else and excitement. And it's ironic because Joe Glazer booked Hamp, and he also had Louis Armstrong and Duke. And at that time, agents, like they all do, they said, you can't get Hamp unless you take Duke and Basie. I mean, Duke and Louis Armstrong. And because Hamp was the band, we do 71 nighters, and just not even think about it all the time, 700 miles a night. And to me, that was heaven. And in the very beginning, when I was 15, I almost got in the band. And I got thrown off the band bus, and I just died. And she said, Gladys Hampton said, later, go back to school, get your butt right back to school, and we'll talk later. And sure enough, she did. And this lady, Janet Thurlow, who was in the band, the singer, and she was with a friend of my roommate, eventually, Jimmy Cleveland. And when I was in Boston in school, they called for real. And I said, absolutely, I will be there. And I told the school I'd be right back. I never did go back because Berkeley was a great school. And that band, man, it was Jerome Richardson and all these guys and the excitement of playing the job every night and traveling. And I would write out 8 bars at a time, and then just before we'd go on in 45 minutes, we'd get in the corner and play these things and test voice things, and it's like a workshop and just like a school. It was amazing. Then on top of that, we went to Europe. And by this time, before we went to Europe, we had gone to Atlantic City to see, at the Club Harlem, to see Thad Dameron's band, who was playing with Larry Steele's review. And in Tad's band, there was Benny Golson, Gigi Grice, and Clifford Brown. And we used to hang out with them, and one night all of us went over to see Tiny Bradshaw. We said, who is that tenor player with Tiny Bradshaw? It was John Coltrane. And, I mean, it was fire back then. And we said, Hamp, we beg you. I mean, we're making $17 a night, please, We couldn't care less about that. We said, you got to have these guys in the band. Take half of my salary, whatever, And so he hired these 3 guys in the band. And Gigi and Clifford went to Europe with us the first time. And we got to Stockholm, totally unaware of how hot the Swedish musicians were, because they were. We came from Oslo on the train. Gladys had parrots. She used to carry parrots around, and we got held up on the train because they wouldn't let these parrots do custom. So by the time we finally got through and came into Stockholm, on a baggage cart was an accordion player. It's this Bengt Hallberg, who had just recorded with Stan Getz and Miles on Dear Old Stockholm and all those great songs. Simon Bremband, Åke Persson, Lars Gullin, Bengt Arne Wallin, the most incredible horn sound I ever heard in my life. And I said, what is this all about? Because I thought all of the action was going to be in Spain and France and Italy, Man, the Swedes blew our heads off. I couldn't believe it. And so Bertie Eckberg from Metronome Records said, we'd like to do a record session here. And he said, I don't know, he said, write up some 4 arrangements or something. And he gave me $5 an arrangement. And we had to sneak out because Hamp didn't want us to record. And so we had to sneak out the back steps at 1 o'clock to try to go to the sessions. What we didn't know was about the midnight sun. So we're sneaking out at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. At 1 o'clock in the morning, the sun comes up. And the guys who were looking out for us that were going to sneak out, they caught us on the elevators on the stairways a couple of times. But we recorded with Clifford Brown, Art Farmer, and all the Swedish all-stars like Lars Gullin
And is that when you recorded Midnight Sun and Stock?
No, this was before that. This Midnight Sun was 1958. Okay. This was 1953.
So what were the songs you
These are songs, Stockholm Sweetening, Falling in Love with Love, and Excuse These Blues. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, the time, I remember it like it was just last week.
We can cue that song perfectly.
Oh,
that's great.
yeah.
What about, you get a chance to do your own big band with Free and Easy. As briefly as you can, it's a very complicated backstory with a Broadway musical and all those different elements, but set up the opportunity presented to you, and then what happens?
Well, we had this dream. I don't know how could have been that presumptuous on the management side or our side, is that we get this amazing band that we would be involved in on stage and costumes, even speaking roles, and we would go over with Harold Nicholas at first and break in Utrecht, Holland, and Amsterdam, and in Brussels, and in Paris, and then meet Sammy Davis in London and take it to Broadway for 2 years. And I mean, at that time, I didn't know what kind of a fantasy that was. It sounded like a good idea, though. So Clark Terry, and Quentin Jackson left Duke's band and came and joined us, and we rehearsed, and it's just one of the most smoking bands I've ever heard in my life. And everything went as planned up until the time we got to Paris. We went in the Alhambra Theater, and it was during the Algerian crisis, and we got in trouble. And, people were, at that time in the front of the Herald Tribune, they'd have a little square at the bottom every day, remind you, all swarthy-skinned people stay home and stay off the street after 6 o'clock, because it was really rough then, What would happen is the Algerians sometimes would go by a police station and spray down automatically. So the return fire, people didn't ask questions in those days. I used to go see Art Simmons, and I got out of the car like that, because I'd hear the cock. As soon as I got out, I heard the machine gun cock, And I mean, it's just one flinch, and it's over. It was that dangerous over there then. And so the show folded, and we got a notice on a Thursday night, I think it was a Thursday, and the producer, Stanley Chase, says, "I'm sorry, but we can't make it. We're not going to see Sammy, and 2 days from now will be the guaranteed transportation to go home." And I was young and foolish and headstrong and said, "This is a great band. We're going to make it." And so we had a midnight concert on that Saturday anyway, so we couldn't. I wasn't going to blow that concert. And I got one more concert. We blew the plane, and here I'm with 30 people, and an 18-piece band with Phil Woods, Chan Parker, who was Charlie Parker's wife, and we had Charlie Parker's son there, Baird Parker, and Kim, and dogs, and families and wives and everything else. And I said, "What have I done here?" And I had a payroll to make every week, to these guys. I was $4,800, $5,000, and I didn't have a cent. And no manager, no agent, nothing. And so we went for it. So we went to, we played, the train left, it was a guaranteed transportation home. We played the concert, Daniel Philippaki and Frank Teno, great guys at the Jazz Magazine and the radio show. Midnight concert at the Olympia, and it was just a smash success. We chartered a plane, boy, I had nerves of steel, to Stockholm, and I had talked to some little young promoter that came to me and said, "I want to book 16 dates for the band." I said, "Do it, man, that's what we needed now, badly." And so we went to Stockholm, came back, then, I know this sounds complicated, but this is what happened. The movie director, and I still want to write movies worse than anything. I didn't even come close by then. So Jacques Demy says, "I'm making a picture in Nantes, which is all the way on the coast, with a young girl named Anouk Ami. And I'd like you to do this movie." I said, "Yeah, I've got all these people in Paris, right?" I take a train over to Nantes that morning. I see the picture, meet Anouk and everything else, and I see problems in the picture because they'd recorded a song that had no melody on it and everything else. And I didn't know about pre-recording. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know enough to know what to do. I said, "I want to do it." I come back to Paris. The promoter that's supposed to have booked all of our dates got the advances to the dates and left town. And so we were stranded in Paris, no money, and 30 people. And I called Jacques Demy back up and say, "Man, you know how bad I want to do this," but I said, "I'm in trouble. I got to take care of my babies first. I've got to take care of my band." And I said, "But I have a friend that studied with me with Nadia Boulanger, His name is Michel Legrand, and he's the best. And he was. He did that film, and the next film was Umbrellas of Cherbourg. After that, I always used to kid Jacques and say it could have been Umbrellas of Harlem, you know, because Michel did that with the Blue Stars, and it was all operatic. And meanwhile, back in the ranch with the band, we go through a series of 10 months of the most incredible experiences you've ever seen in your life. Through Yugoslavia, 13 cities in Yugoslavia, walking across bridges where the bridge is about to fall down if we stay on the bus, and just unbelievable. I mean, we went everywhere. Folk parks in Sweden. I put them on a train, a slow train from Spain after we finished Portugal and Spain, and stay up all night doing the payroll, where Phil Woods will see me in Germany for some marks, and Shahab sees me in Swiss francs, and so Benny Bailey sees me in Belgium, and Swedish kroner, and we get to Spain, and I have to translate, to convert all that money into what it is, and then change it into pesetos. I mean, it was enough to take you out, really. And so one time when I was in the States, Andy Williams said he wanted to do an album with me when we worked the Steve Allen Show. And so I remembered that. And we were in such trouble. I said, Andy, we really need the money, you know. Let's do the album now. And I put my whole band, on a slow train to Yugoslavia and flew to Paris with Billy Byers and a couple other people. And we knocked that album out. Dave Grusin was his musical director, and that's when Dave and I first met. This was 1959, I think, or 60. And we got to Yugoslavia before the band got there. And we were stuck with we had the money, about $60,000 that we made from the tour, but it didn't mean anything because it was a communist country. And I bought train tickets out of Yugoslavia all over Germany in speculation that if we got a job there, we could get reimbursed for the money. It was you can't believe it was like a B movie. It was so funny. And then Nat Cole called us and Norman Granz to do a tour with them, and it just.
But ultimately, you had to give up. And
oh yeah.
What happened?
What I was so tired, and Billy Taylor was remotely involved with this because the man he had introduced me to, the publisher, Charlie Hanson, and Irving Green, I said, I got to come home because I was in Utrecht, well, not Utrecht, Finland. I can't remember the name of the city. Yeah, and I was ready to do myself in. I just couldn't handle the pressure anymore because it was performing and on the payrolls and trying to book and everything else. So it just, I think when people think about taking their own life, it's not about, it's just about 15 minutes apiece. You get some rest for a while. That's why you shouldn't do anything drastic. You can't change your mind. But I was that close there. And I talked to Irving Green and sold my publishing companies and so forth and got everybody collected, and we finally got on the United States and brought them home. And we went by in Copenhagen before we left to see Oscar Pettiford, who passed as we were on the way back, who's a good friend of mine. And we came back to the States, and we played Basin Street East with Peggy Lee and Johnny Ray, Billy Eckstein.
But the bottom line was you owed a lot of money when you came back.
Absolutely.
Just very briefly, what you owed money, and what did you have to do?
I had to. Irving Green said, "Come work here as an A&R man at Mercury Records, and you can sit here while you recoup and have a place to a nest, really." And then he eventually made me vice president a year later. And he says, "I want to show you about the other side of the business, because it's a music business, and now you have to learn that part, because I was not into that at all. I just knew about the music and the aesthetic side. And I said, that's going to pull us through. I mean, please, we got slaughtered." The mumps.
I'm going to jump around a little bit. Just
okay.
Because,
I'm doing the same.
You got it. Yeah, one quick adjustment of the cameraman, because we're always searching for perfection. Our isn't there. Lise?
How are you doing?
Okay, will you send her for our car when
They dry?
Do you need
she comes out?
I'm on the way.
Thanks. Way ahead, because I think that's smart.
It's funny because since the book, I feel like we just have plowed through so many years and hours and minutes. It's an amazing feeling, man. I never, ever look back in my life, ever. And that book, boy, it pushes you back there, you know.
It's a great book. From what I've read, I mean, I haven't read the whole thing, but it's really compelling. I loved
It's like looking at somebody else's life, you know.
Clarence Avant. I mean, he was,
Is he a trip?
he was amazing.
Banana peels.
Okay, you ready, Nardi?
Yeah.
We can't tell your story without touching on your work with Michael Jackson. Tell me, and I don't mean that in any down way, but tell me, to jump to that, very briefly, how you met him, and what do you think accounted for the huge appeal of Off the Wall?
Well, I met him initially at Sammy Davis's house when he was 12, and that was just a quickie. You know, they'd just done the Ed Sullivan show. And fast forward, he comes over to my house after Sidney Lumet. We decided that I'm going to be a musical director for The Wiz. And we've got to, always in a musical, you have to pre-record everybody, Diana Ross and Michael and Lena Horne and all these people, about 6 principals there. And so when Michael came through the door, you know, he must have been 18 or 19. And the first thing he said to me was, could you help me find a producer? Because I'm doing my first solo album, next solo album on Epic Records. I said, Michael, fine, but we can't talk about that now. We have pre-record to do. Let's try to do that. You don't even have a song in the picture right now. Let's get that first things first. And he finally got You Can't Win. And we did the pre-recording. During rehearsals, I saw the blocking at the St. George Hotel out in Brooklyn. Sidney Lumet's rehearsing him, and he's the scarecrow. He pulls out these sayings by Confucius, and da-da-da-da, all these great philosophers. He said, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, Socrates. Socrates, every day he said that. And I said, nobody was correcting him. And so I went to the side and said, Michael, before it becomes a habit, you know, it's Socrates. And he said, really? And his eyes were wide like that. And I had been watching him rehearse, and I've never seen anybody so disciplined. He had to put his makeup on at 5 o'clock in the morning for the scarecrow stuff. He knew everybody's song in the show. He knew every dance step. He knew every line of dialogue of everybody's. I've never seen anything like it in my life. You know, there's such my bright, alert mind and so much talent. Dancing, forget about it, because he was amazing there. And when he mentioned producer, I was thinking about all the things I loved in the bubblegum stuff at Motown. But I said, no, there's much more to him. There's a lot of things in him that haven't been exposed before. And so when he said, really, after Socrates, I said, I'll be a producer. You know, I'd like to do that. I'd like to take a shot. His record company didn't want to know about it because they said Quincy's too jazzy. He's only done the Brothers Johnson, blah, 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 blah. Went back. Michael and Freddie DeMann and Ron Weiss, as managers, went back and said Quincy's doing the record. And so we did. I went through to pick the songs. As I feel a producer's biggest job is to get the right material. Half of your job is done if you got the right songs. So, see, in that, he wrote Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. He wrote Working Day and Night. I had a track that the Brothers Johnson had done, and he wrote the melody to that and Get on the Floor. And we got Stevie Wonder's Can't Help It. And we made the record. And it was as pure as it could be. We just made a record that we liked, you know. And that's the best way to do it. And if other people are with you, fine. Because if you try to figure out what people like, I don't know how to do that. And it was the people that said that it was the wrong choice. It was one of the biggest black records that came out, that come out of, that ever been out at that time. It was, I think, 10 million albums, 8 million albums. And we went on from there and did Thriller and Bad.
Maybe I misheard you, but you said the biggest black album? Is that what you said?
Biggest selling black album.
Yeah. Well, does Thriller become a black album? Is that a crossover album? What accounts for the success of Thriller?
That's when I first came with the Mercury as an A&R man, I said, what is a jazz record? And they said, a jazz record is any record that sells under 20,000. When it gets past 20,000, it's no longer a jazz record. And that's like Michael. You can't call Thriller a black record, you know, or Off the Wall either. But it's nonsense anyway. It really is, because the categories, that's where you really hit my Achilles heel. And I guess Duke and the guys trained me to that, because Duke, the last words he said to me, and he wrote down on the picture when I produced a special for him, he says, "May you be the one to continue to decategorize American music." And because I really feel strongly about that. I hate categories, because if you know, it means that people are limited to their environment, you know, and limited to what they can express.
Great. But tell me a little bit about Making Thriller. I paged through the thing. There's something about a speaker.
The what?
So hot, Making Thriller. There's a problem with the speaker. What was that?
Oh, at the end of Thriller, it got pretty frantic, because we were aiming at 4 months to make Thriller. In the process, I had just met Spielberg, and we became really close friends. He was making E.T., and I was doing Thriller, and we got just enamored of each other. He said, "Let's intern each other." He gave me a viewfinder. I gave him a synthesizer. He'd come over to the Thriller sessions. I'd go over to Laird, and at that time they were calling E.T. Slimehead West. Because the first one, they made the first model they made, E.T., they had to go back and do it again because he looked like a little brother, you know. So that's why he gave him blue eyes the second time. And so Spielberg said, "Why don't you and Michael, would you do a song?" E.T.'s like the biggest picture in the world, and we hadn't released Thriller yet. And he said, "Would you do a song for a storybook version of E.T.? So you have to convert a 2-hour visual experience into a 40-minute oral experience, and then make people feel the same thing." So he said, "Do the song." We did it with Rod Temperton and Marilyn Bergman and Michael. He loved it. But little did we know he was going to say, "Will you guys please do the whole thing?" I said, "Stephen, we've got to do Thriller, you know." And they came over with all of E.T.'s footsteps and dialogue and Johnny Williams music and everything else, and that's really structurally. You have to get really structured. And so we did that in about 6 or 8 weeks, and we only had 2 months left for Thriller. And we got trapped ourselves in a way, because we had to stop one project and go record Paul McCartney and Michael to put the first single out, "The Girl Is Mine." So the tail was wagging the dog there. That single was kind of governing the release and what our progress was about. And once we said we were in the studio, we were not even close to being finished, and that record's going up like that. And it's about number 2, and we're in this last week of a recording. By this time, I've got 3 studios going. I've got Van Halen in one studio over here, and Michael's over here with cylindrical tubes on Beat It, and somebody's in another studio. And the last day, we were putting on the bass lines to Beat It with Greg Gaines and some of the guys from Toto. And Bruce comes in the other studio screaming, you know, and he was mixing Beat It, and the right speaker was in flames. I've never seen that, but just, you know, sonic, I guess that's a lot of power in it's physics, really, and it was in flames. And we, at 9 o'clock, we put everything on, all the elements on, and we knew we were in trouble, because nobody wanted to make the song shorter. You know, we had a long Rod Temperton song. Billie Jean was twice as long because of an intro. Michael said, "That's the jelly, that makes you want to dance," which would shut us up right away, because, you know, we got Bruce Swedien and Rod and I, we're not dancers. And so 9 o'clock we put it down, all finished, and then Bruce is going to take it and master it and put it on a disc so we can hear it, what's going to go out to the public. I take Michael to my house, put him on the couch and put a blanket on him, and we've got to get back up at 12 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. 3 hours we've got to get back up and listen to this advanced acetate to see, is this what we want? Knowing we had problems. So we walked back in there. Larkin Arnold is there, who's one of the executives, with champagne pouring, ready. "Oh, this is great. We finally have the record." And it sounded awful, because vinyl in those days, you had to have big grooves, especially the kind of stuff we were recording, because we used a lot of SMPTE time code connecting all the tracks together. So we had a lot of tapes, you know, and we had squashed. We had 28 minutes aside. And you have to have 19 minutes so you can have bigger grooves. If you put 28, they become very tiny and squished together. Anyway, it was a disaster. Michael was crying and everything else, and so we decided to take 2 days off and come back and do one a day, and that's the one that came out. And he had to cut off a piece of a Billie Jean. We had to cut a verse out of A Lady in My Life, And that baby like laid it right in the pocket. And that's the one that did it. It was an exciting journey. It really was, because it just exploded. It was ridiculous. And we had no idea that would be bigger than Off the Wall. It's just amazing.
You had a fun nickname for Michael Jackson, and describe, what it was like working with him.
Michael was, we called Michael Smelly, because he never said bad words, and in that group that was hard to do. He said smelly jelly for something good, so we'd call him Smelly, and his mother used to look at us like we were crazy. What do you call my son, Smelly? This doesn't smell bad, We didn't mean that, though. And he's is really a cross between a 60-year-old wise man and a child. He really is. He's got the most incredible combination now, because the wisdom is just awesome, and way beyond his years, like he's been here 3 or 4 times, and the other side is like he just has never seen anything before. I mean, when he used to play songs to me sometimes in my home, I'd sit on my couch, and sometimes I'd even have to put my hands over my eyes, and he would sit on the other side of the couch with his back to me to sing me the song. 20 or 90,000 people, no problem, but that's the way I had to listen to the song, because he was so shy, I used to have to do with Frank DeLeo a lot of his press conferences for him. But he was the most professional. Unbelievable. He would stand in front of that mic until he dropped. He'd take the lights down, and he'd dance as almost though he was doing a concert, and get all the way into the song. And he would really do his homework, and I really respect that. There's nothing worse than having a singer on their own album come in with a piece of paper with the words on it, because that means they've got to think more than they feel, or at least 50-50. But when they've got it, they can close their eyes, and Tevin Campbell's the same way. When you close their eyes, you know they got it here instead of here. And Michael had it. He did his homework.
Back on the block, jumping ahead again. Very important for you for a lot of reasons. A, help us understand your concept of the relation from bebop to hip hop. And my brother and parents don't really know bebop or hip hop. Help, just explain that in a way so
they understand.
They understand it,
okay.
Because music people get that. But tell us why that's for you a really important album.
The Back on the Block, it was like it was a fusion. My thing has always been like I don't know, the father's trying to pull all the kids back into the family. They'd run away from home. To pull them all back in the family, because Back on the Block was about my origins, which is jazz and bebop, and it had African music in it. We were doing things in Zulu, gospel, mainstream jazz, R&B, rap, everything. Now my son was an absolute rap junkie, from day one. He was a breaker in a group called Berserk in Sweden when he was 14, and it was they were big stars, as breakdancers. And it was, let me say this as a key. When I took my son to meet Russell Simmons. I think the first records that came out in Def Jam. We went down to Def Jam. Russell had some nice, elegant, Fred Sanford-looking offices. And he had My Adidas had just come out with DMC and Orange Juice Jones, Walking in the Rain. And that was the first day, I think, and all the guys were Beastie Boys and all of the people on the label. And LL Cool was 15, and this was significant. He said to me, "Mr. Jones," and I heard that a long time because he was engaged to my daughter for a while. "Mr. Jones, what do the singers and the musicians think of us?"
I think we're going to have to go back to what let's reframe, pick up the phone, reframe, and then we'll pick up with
I'll
Al.
give it Cool
J. Sure, they're giving us a heads up on the
Yeah.
next photo shoot.
Yeah. No. Probably 15 or 20.
Yeah.
What is that? I'm not.
Yes.
LL Cool J calls. Mr. Jones, right from there.
Mr. Jones, he says, "What do the singers and musicians think about us?" And that's the first time I ever realized, and they're right, that they consider themselves a third entity. I never thought outside of that box because I didn't give it that much thought. Because we were playing around with the rap, or whatever you want to call it, in 1975. And if you remember Mellow Madness, we had a group on there called the Watch Prophets, which were like along with the Last Poets and Just Got Heron. I mean, before any of that stuff came out. So we didn't even know what we were playing with, but that was around that era. And I know Harvey Mason was playing like hip-hop drum beats on it then. And I think Rapper's Delight was out when, 79? And Russell started about 85. So we were on the path, not even on a whole other thing. That connection with bebop and hip-hop was, I guess, kind of subliminal. They come from the same place. Bebop came from a very pure place. It came organic growth, and it didn't have the acceptance that hip-hop did at all, because it was certainly a subculture. But the similarities, number one, they both brought a vernacular to the scene. They brought a lifestyle. They brought a body language and everything else. I mean, beboppers acted a certain way. They did not walk like normal people. They had a whole different thing, just like hip hop, and it was across the board. Hip hop even goes further because it has graffiti, it has visuals and everything, and slang. Because rock and roll didn't bring much slang to the table. They're still using cool. That came from back to the bebop days, and far out or whatever, But hip-hop they jumped all the way in. They pulled a lot of old school stuff in there. Homeboys, Lester Young and Basie were calling each other home and homeboys, 50 years ago. And I always felt that it was, they played for each other first. Rappers do rap for each other first. Then, now it's about the Benjamins, they're going after the money. But in the beginning, they were doing it for each other, And I've been around a lot of the OGs, like Melly Mel and the dudes that started the whole thing, Curtis Blow. And I feel the similarities of the alienation in the sense, the hip-hoppers couldn't get radio play, that's for sure, and the same thing happened with bebop. So they had to get street teams to get a whole different kind of distribution mindset to get it going. Now, explaining it to your brother, I would say that also that improvisation was another parallel of the similar thing that they had going, because people have a hard time realizing that jazz musicians take the chords to I'm in the Mood for Love, and they play totally spontaneous expressions on melodies and so forth. So Moody's Mood for Love and those things came from James Moody reacting to the chord change to I'm in the Mood for Love. And then another person, Eddie Jefferson, comes, and Jimmy McHugh and Dorothy Fields write the original song. They use those chords, and he plays a jazz solo on it, and Eddie Jefferson writes the lyric to his improvised solo. There I go, there I go, there I go, there I go. And it becomes something called vocalise, So it's like cell division or something. And hip-hop has the same thing. I mean, I've worked with about, I don't know, a couple of dozen hip-hoppers, and I'll send, like I do with singers, I'm used to sending tapes so they can get familiar with the material a week or two before the session. Doesn't mean a thing. Was it Heavy D or Ice-T? I said, you listen to tape? Nope. Let me hear it. They played back in the studio. One time, they sit and write in 10 minutes, let's record. 2 takes, done. Rhythmic and everything. The most creative dudes I've ever seen, just like beboppers, and totally improvise. It's awesome, really. I mean, I've worked with them, so I know, that they'll not play around. And it doesn't take long either. I mean, they're faster in a sense than a lot of those improvising solos, that are just instrumentalists.
That album also came at a time where, after all these huge successes, you'd had a moment of sort of self-examination, and that was like the jumping into the void again, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Well, it's a culmination. Everything had happened during that time. We'd been all through the 80s with everything you could possibly imagine, from Benson and Michael Jackson, We of the World, Color Purple. I just jumped straight into, because I think when your thing is happening is when you should take all the most chances, And so I came straight out of all of that, which couldn't have been any better. to say I want to really learn how to make movies well under the best people, with the best people out there. And so Steven Spielberg is definitely one of the best, And I was by his side for 2 years and nothing else. I didn't even listen to radio, and it's the most incredible growth and experience that I've ever felt outside of music, because in many ways it's the same thing, because he thinks like a musician too. He'd drive me to work every morning in North Carolina, and we'd talk about everything from his influences to what John Ford told him about lighting when he was a kid. How do you learn lighting? He said, look at the painters, look at Rembrandt, look at Cézanne, Monet, and that's what natural light is all about. And there was this cross-pollination of each other's minds, which I really like, And he would come to the session. He said, we have a certain foundation, like Nadia said, that only could be so bad musically, and then you start to stretch out and experiment and try other things. I said, that's just the way I work too, because I set up a scene with E.T., and we do it, and once we get the one that's like the missionary position way of doing it, then we go and stretch out and freak out and try all different other things, and that's why I'm doing it. Put E.T.'s head up here, do that, try that, and it's this incredible similarity there, and I don't know. I saw when we got on the plane on the way to. We did 3 weeks of interiors, the juke joint stuff, because Amy Irving was having his son Max, and they had to wait for his birth. 3 days after Max was born, we were on the plane to North Carolina. It was amazing. To 90-degree weather and mosquitoes and cottonmouth water moccasins, and I'd said to Stephen that they what kind of scope was he looking at? Because he's the master of letting a picture take its own life. And he said To Kill a Mockingbird, that picture went into Gone with the Wind. In 3 days, it just took its own life. And I remember Stephen, he holds his finger in his mouth when he begins to shout. He says, action! And he puts his finger in his mouth all the time. It's just amazing. And I'll never forget the shot. I don't know if you remember when they had the wagon with the 2 lanterns on the side, and they were bringing Suge up in the rain. Boy, Stephen was like he was on another planet. He was so into that, and I just saw that he just let go and just was so in charge of that, what that was about. That's when you see him at his highest peak of creativity.
How do you help find the star? Sorry, you okay? How do you help find the stars?
We were talking about people, and at that time, Stephen had about 4 or 5 pictures that could have been made, including Schindler's List. And Always, he had Peter Pan, which eventually turned into Hook. And quietly, we felt that whoever got it right the quickest, that's the one Stephen would go with, because it took a lot of guts for him to go with Color Purple after that success of Raiders and Close Encounters and all the things he had out, because there was no ILM special effects, and it's just some black people walking around on the ground, no special effects at all. And I was glad to see him jump in like that. He jumped in very sincerely. And
when it came time to choosing new tape,
talk about the actress. A little cold. Why'd you do that? What does that do?
The sound.
Okay, that's cute, man. It looks like a little kid,
No, it's good. Okay. So, you're going to produce your first huge Hollywood picture.
No, wait a minute. No, that's not. This was not a huge Hollywood picture at all. That there was never word never came up, and that at all. Even though Steven Spielberg was involved, it never was talked about as a big Hollywood picture. Our budget for that picture at first was $11 million. That's not a big Hollywood picture at all. And we finally squeaked up and fought for $14 million. It cost a $14 million picture. That's not a big Hollywood picture at all. You can't even find a picture today for $14 million.
Let me rephrase that. It's your first experience as a producer on a feature. I meant big in the sense that it's a big step for you.
Yeah. Okay,
I'm sorry. It's a big step for you, and one of the big jobs you have is trying to figure out who's the best people for these parts.
Right.
So tell me about that position.
Well, went through a long process to try to find writers. We finally found Menno Mayes. I saw that he understood what was going on, and Stephen guided everybody through it because Stephen just saw it. It just kept coming, and interstitial. I think to see directors think about interstitial stuff first. You know, where the dog prints in the back of Whoopi's garden go into elephant prints in Africa and all that kind of stuff, and I understand that. Then it was talk about Diana Ross and talk about Richie Pryor and so forth, and we all agreed that it is definitely a picture as powerful as this, because it was there were letters. We had to transfer that epistolary premise to a narrative, which is very difficult to do, but the spirit was there, and the most powerful, inspired story you could ever ask for from Alice Walker. And so we started to talk about, believe and feel very strongly we needed people that came to the screen with no baggage and no other associations at all. So we call them the color purple people. And Alice told us about this lady that was working up in San Francisco that was doing Mom's Mabley, and one woman show, etc. And we brought her down to Amblin to check out one night, and it's funny because we had Pryor and Michael and Valerie, Nick Ashford and Simpson and everybody, and we're sitting in the theater, and Whoopi comes from behind us singing Around the World and some bad words in it, and she knocked us out, you know, with a one-woman show, because she was definitely, I mean, it was like divine what she did that night. Stephen was just, that when she knew that was it, that was Seeley. And then in the midst of this, while we're casting, Yetnikoff and Michael Jackson asked me I have to go to Chicago to help them fight a case against plagiarism, which was totally bogus, because they're the same guys that sued the Bee Gees. It was just a scam, you know, with the lawyers and the writer. And so I'm very unhappy with this now because we're trying to get the picture done right. And so I take the CBS plane out there, and I can't sleep, and restless, and so I turn on the TV set at 9:15, and I see this face, you know. I mean, it just slapped me. I was just so hard, you know, just emotionally. I didn't know whether she could act. I didn't know who she was. I couldn't pronounce her name or anything. And I said, who is that, you know? But I said, whoever it is, that's Sophia. No, there was no doubt about it. And we got the tape, and when the cosmic aspect of her name backwards spelling Harpo was just really freaky. And I sent the tape back to Reuben Cannon to give to Stephen. And then Stephen, we called Alice down because we wanted Alice to sign off and everything else. It was funny because we were both afraid to stay in the room, you know, we knew she was hot and everything else. And Alice came back, and Alice was crying and applauding and everything else. And one Saturday, Stephen called all the principals to Amblin, and just he on camera, and Menno Mayes and myself were in the room, and they take 2 lines and improvise with all the people. I just sent Oprah a tape on this because it was really amazing, you know, to see Whoopi and Danny Glover and her and Willard improvise the lines and about when Oprah kicked his butt, you know. He said, you got to beat her. You got to beat her and stuff. And he came back and said, no, the mule did that. I got her. But the mule did this. The mule kicked him in the eye. And from that moment on, you know, we knew these were the people to do this picture. And Oprah wasn't even on the marquee. And she, I remember Jeffrey Jacobs on the set of down in North Carolina, along with the King brothers. They said if she gets a nomination, they're going to do the biggest blitz ever in television, and they did. I think it was 1/8 of a page on every page of TV Guide. The rest is history. And man, she can handle it too, because there's no end to her, none. Because she's been blessed by something divine. She really is beyond even her own comprehension, really.
Another guy who's blessed in a way I can't even touch comes out of a TV show you produce based on a Benny Medina story. Again, very briefly, how does that happen? You just decide I'm going to make a TV show and this is a good premise and I'm going to pick this guy. I read in your book something about your belly button. How does that happen?
Well, you know, it's you have a lot of choices with everything. You know, the people come to you with stories and scripts and songs all the time. You know, we get 850 tapes a week with songs on it. And to tell you the truth, I have never ever in 7 years, whatever it is, in the record business, ever once got a tape that worked, unsolicited tape. I get tapes from other pros that send me, like Russ Titleman sent me a tape of a great song called Just Once. And the singer on there was a piano player with the Coasters and Ray Charles. It was James Ingram, you know. But that's from a pro. But I've never got an unsolicited tape ever that worked. This Benny told me about this story, and it was, I don't know, the person it happened with was a friend of mine. It was a conductor for Jacqueline Francois when I was in France, you know, Jack Elliott. So I understood it. I could see it and feel it when he told me about it. It was a great premise, and I think the last 8 minutes of a meeting we were having with Brandon Tartikoff and Warren Littlefield at NBC, and Benny came in and I told him this story. And it was funny because when we were doing, Benny was the head of black music at Warner Brothers, and we were out doing Arsenio's Hall show. We had everybody, Kevin Campbell to all the rappers, Ice-T and everything else, back on the block, which we'd done on the show that night. And leaving the premises that night, I think Will was asking Benny, I mean, that's how the connections like that happen. You don't even know why they happen. And he was asking Benny how to get to the farm or something like that. And so Benny ended up getting the video of I think, Parents Just Don't Understand, and it all just all fell into that thing. And
There he is.
and Will, you know, but you know, they have to bring it home. You know, it's all of it is a part of the other thing, and I really believe in the divinity of all that. I really do. I think once you start saying that you are cause and manifestation, you get in trouble, because cause is God's job, you know, and it's a good person to let it stay with. And but Will, the first day on the set, he didn't even know which camera to look at. Man, he learned so fast because he pays attention, and it goes without saying what happened. You know, he was very wise in his choices, you know, between James Lassiter and Benny or whoever was working with him, to pick the right movies to do during his hiatus. Because the first was like a 15-minute cameo in Made in America with Whoopi and Ted Danson. You have to be cool and take your time, because everybody's in a hurry now, you know. 15 minutes in a picture, that takes a lot of discipline. The second one was 6 Degrees of Separation, which I knew about because we were trying to get the rights. We went, Alec Baldwin was in it, and John Guare in New York. We went to see that. We tried to get the rights to it ourselves. And then he did Bad Boys, and then he did, Independence Day, Men in Black, and over. And we were out to see Courtney Ross for the weekend. Steven Spielberg lives down the road, you know, and we saw Will there, all over.
What about, you know, when I think of the major events in the 90s and the turn of the millennium, that maybe was that? Let's make sure.
It's Lisa.
I think about Academy Award producing that show, and I think about the Millennium Concert. I mean,
And the Millennium, the inauguration.
Oh, and the inauguration.
That was the fun.
Walk me through that inauguration show and moments there. Very briefly, the Oscar show, which had to be a departure for you. You'd once done music directing in the 70s, I guess.
That's right.
But then there's something about the way America chose to celebrate the millennium, and the fact that you were chosen by the president to, you know, that's an emblematic moment for our country.
Oh, my
What
God.
did you try to do?
Well, you know, it's I don't know. It's psychologically that one was a trip, because being Pisces and whatever Piscian, to me it felt like a big abstract wall that we crossed, a line that we crossed, you know, and it was everything was built around that. I remember even the after it was conceived with George Stevens and Steven Spielberg of what we were going to try to do. We had Clinton was going to do a speech at the midnight moment, and his speech was supposed to end just in time at first we were going to have a child, him give the torch to the child, but the Secret Service wouldn't let him go down there because he had to be in the crowd. And so we had the cue, after he finished his speech, the cue, so the torch lit the fuse that went all the way down that pond and then hit blocks and implements in increments of like 50 feet each, you know. Wow, wow, for the countdown. Wow, wow. Tremendous timing, you know, computerized timing. And our president it was a very emotional speech. And the timing, at that time, I don't know, I remember I was sitting next to Teddy Kennan, everybody was talking, but I didn't hear anybody say a word because I was just worried about that timing because we couldn't go back and say, okay, we have to do that over again. If you got to hit midnight, man, there's no oops room in this, you know. You got to really hit that right. So the stuff was on the monitor, computerized, and we had to accelerate, you know, I mean, to keep it so it was totally timed and move it up at that time. So, and he had to speak a little faster so we could hit those marks, you know. So I'm working backwards from that, and the whole idea was to try. We had a much more ambitious plan at first, but all those plans cost a lot of money. We were running around the last 10 days to get $4 million. It was amazing, and they had great people like they get mad at what I tell her. Kurt Kerkorian, Tommy Hilfiger. Jerry Parencio and John Chambers, they gave it up, man. I mean, no nonsense, and 20 seconds each, and they were there because we couldn't have, you know, you get 2001, you can't just mumble into that. You got to have all that stuff, man. You know, with fireworks and stuff, it's just not about subtlety because it's too big, you know. I mean, we didn't have the Eiffel Tower, which is, but it was an amazing moment. And I felt the same about the inauguration. The inauguration was amazing because we had turned the precedent around. Usually that was like a secondary show, the Lincoln Memorial Show. The big one was the following Tuesday, was 20,000 people in black tie. And we were determined to change that whole pattern. And we just, when the Clintons first said to do the show, I said, let me see what happened the last time. And I saw Bush and Quayle walk down the steps, and here comes the Beach Boys, you know, and everybody's scratching, laid back, and I thought, we can do better than that. I mean, we can blow it up more than that, you know, because it was just very laid back, you know. And, I mean, we ended up with, my God, it was just, that day it was so emotional. I remember Jack Nicholson crying, and I've known Jack before Easy Rider, you know, I don't see Jack cry very often. And we were doing the Ode to the Common Man, the Lincoln's, what do they call it? The Copeland thing, Portrait of Lincoln. And it was Edward James Olmos, James Jones, Oprah, and Nicholson. And everybody showed. Whoopi, just you name it, Aretha, Gloria Estefan, everybody showed. And it was something I'll never forget. It was just, and they'd cut back and forth to the president, and he knew every word of all of the famous speeches we had. I Have a Dream with Dr. King, and That's Not What You Could Do for Your Country. At the last minute, I was trying to get the Kennedy representative to follow Jack's clip, you know, and we had the one to follow the Dr. King clip. And we ended up with LL Cool finally following it, which is protest in the 50s and protest in the 90s, you know. A lot of people on some of the committees weren't happy about that, but LL took it out. LL rocked that crowd that day, you know.
Do you think you connect with Bubba, President Clinton, because of the music background, or because what is your connection?
The human being. I love the human being.
Just give his name up front for the
President Clinton, ex-President Clinton. It was just a communication on a level. He connects with people, you know. And I've been going to the White House since I was 18 with Lionel Hampton. We played for the inauguration for Dwight Eisenhower. And I remember I stayed around that night. Everybody said, Miles Davis is coming. I said, what? 1952. And some, 60-year-old dude said, Miles Davis is coming. I said, man, this is great. You know, it was Meyer Davis, society band. I said, please. But I've never connected with anybody like him. It's just, it's very real. And Hillary Clinton, too. Chelsea, they're great. We're great.
what did he want from the millennium? You remember him, like you sit around and he says, "This is what I."
Well, Hillary was a lot of Hillary's the one that called us about that, and she said, honor. What was it? Honor the past, and deal with the future, and look to the future, and that's what it was about, really. Because we've gone through a lot of things, and it's, the funny thing about it really was the premise is to look back and take the best of what we had in the 20th century, bring that with us, and leave all the rest of that garbage back there. Don't bring that baggage to the next century, because we had enough troubles, enough problems, and I think that was everybody's attitude. The wonderful film that Stephen made, and everything that's what that was about, because this is an amazing country. It really is. It's if you don't believe it, you go to some other places and see.
Let me jump back to something that we skipped over. 1974, something happens to you that, changes your life entirely. It's something that very few people survive. Speak to me about that experience, if you would.
I had been working very hard for 2-3 days, and I went in to lie down on my way to sleep, and I went into a coma. I didn't know what it was, and I woke up. It was like somebody blew my whole head off. The pain was so excruciating, and I was double vision and everything, and I couldn't get it together, and I just kept going back into the coma. And one time I came to. At this time, I had been told that Peggy Lipton, who I was married to at the time, called the paramedics, and they came and they said, nothing's wrong. His heart is as strong as a mule. And so they didn't know what was wrong. And I woke up again, and I saw yellow and white lights, that tunnel, that proverbial tunnel that everybody talks about. And the readout of the mind, which is amazing, because now on your computer, if you put your hand down on the clicker, that's what happens. It just reads straight out. I saw that in 1974, just everything that ever happened to you, because you're in the process really of dying. And the first thing I became evident was that there were a lot of things, and I've told a lot of people how I really felt about them. I had a daughter that was 6 months old, that never even called me daddy, and just a lot of realities just come slamming down and make you realize that you don't have. It was funny, when I was healing, I would sit there and do a lot of silly things, and realize that you have 30,000 days if you live to 82, and it's not very realistic, because 10,000 you sleep, 10,000 you work. We work much more than that, and 10,000 you do your whatevers. You play, partying and friends, and eat whatever you like to do when it's your time. And it brought a reality into my soul that I never thought about before, because whatever you've got left, cut it in 3. That's not even realistic to say, I've got this many days left, or whatever you're presumptuous enough to assume. And it affects the way you. It pushes the feeling of doing your job every time like it's the first time, and living every day like it's your last time. Very much so. I mean, that's the way I live now.
Great. Let me just check the clock. We got maybe 5 minutes. Here's something that, before I even give you this, because I sort of feel like this is tied to your answer, which is what do you have to do in the studio to make a great artist do their best work?
To bring the best out of an artist in the studio, first you have to respect and love that artist with everything that's in you. Genuinely respect and love that artist. It's that simple. Because when you do that, everything else falls in place. You aware of their need to stop, their need to keep going, their need to eat, their need to vent, their need to be pushed. I remember being in the studio with Betty Davis as a singer. And I was intimidated by her, because she's an actress, but she was on my field, and she said, at 3 practices, she said, for God's sake, yell at me. So I've never done anything good without a director yelling at me. I said, no problem. But you know, it's the humanity that you're dealing with first, you know, because you're dealing with very strong. And let me tell you something. I worked with Billy Eckstein and Ray Charles and Frank Sinatra. Man, they do not play. I mean, you're talking about strong guys that if they perceive for 1 second, you know, or even sniff that you don't know what you're doing and you don't know how to get it done, and please, your dog meat, take you apart because they know and they can feel it. And so I was just happy that I had enough time in my life, you know, to really prepare myself as an orchestrator, as an arranger, and had done enough of this because Frank was always surprised how quickly I could shift gears. If you wanted something to go another way, you know, you got orchestration written out, and in the studio, the half of your job is how quickly you can readjust if something's not working. Movie scores too. I mean, like that with big orchestras, you know, 108 pieces or 68. You know how to do it in the shortest amount of time. You don't have time to send copyists around the studio, so you have to do it verbally. And I've done that. I had experience doing that all over the world, in Sweden, you know, in Germany, in France, Japan, and all that comes in handy. So they say that the opportunity is best, you know, when you're prepared to deal with the opportunity, because you get the big opportunity and have little preparation, and you don't. It's a disaster. So I've just been lucky that I've been prepared for most of the steps that I've made. You know, when you get that call, because they have to call you first.
Well, I came prepared with something that was in the Listen Up book, which you wrote when you were 14, The Composer's Dream.
Oh my God!
I just have an idea of trying it. If you'd be willing to read it, I'd like to try it against some of your early pictures.
Okay.
I blew it up.
Oh
So
my God,
you
that's
can see
so
it.
raggedy.
And if you want, you can just read the first stanza and the last couple. But I'd love it if you just give it a try. We won't use you really on camera.
Oh my God. Okay. Oh, what the hell? I was on, what, 13, 14?
Yeah, preface it if you would by saying.
Yeah, and I talk about that a lot in my book. Whatever happens with your childhood, you have to find your own way out and your own panacea. And mine was to convert all negative energy into something positive as much as you could, because if you let it backfire on you and you get bitter, you take yourself out or you take somebody else out. So I tried to convert it so I went with the dreams. And this is something with a very naive soul and mind that I wrote, I guess, when I was 13 or 14. It's called A Composer's Dream. Any composer would hope to dream of a song that would shock the world, a song that would make them perk up their ears and listen to his music unfurl. I can't believe I said that. A song should have all the beauty and the color of every rose, with a tree for every note and rest, the music that the people will know. Pretty bad rhyme. A composer's ideas are part of his heart. They're just on paper to be played. He works to be ready on the final day. Oh, my God. When he can make your ears his maid. Jesus Christ. Surely this was the idea of Beethoven, Bach, Chopin, and Ravel, but as the years roll on and farther, their ideas we can never tell. But as a composer dreams on, and his dreams are hopeless it seems, even if the people don't listen, he can always thank God for his dreams.
It's that last stanza that somehow was like the kid's dream. It just was so honest and truthful to me.
Lord Jesus. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's so bad.
Yeah, there was, as long as I've got you reading, this is the beginning of your epilogue in your book. And as audio, it might be
okay, like a VO?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Life is like a dream, the Spanish poet and philosopher Federico Garcia Lorca said. Mine's been in Technicolor with full Dolby sound through THX amplification before they knew what these systems even were. Let me do it again?
Yeah, one more time.
Okay.
Hang on, sorry, Ben, the sound.
Just
What?
be conscious of your fingers on that page.
Is it making too much noise?
Yeah, because
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just video. Thanks. Just hold on the bus.
We're
Okay.
just waiting for the bus, and then we'll do it one more time.
life is like a dream. The Spanish poet and philosopher Federico Garcia Lorca said, "My life has been in Technicolor with full Dolby sound through THX amplification before they even knew what these systems were."
You want to make movies?
Please.
Just kidding. I mean, that was beautiful.
That was the right portrait, right?
I'm just thinking.
That is so bad.
That was beautiful. I don't think we need to do that again. That was perfect. I didn't ask you about scoring films. The one last question I want to get. It's different from arranging and composing and creating live events. Tell me how. What is it like to score a film?
Scoring a film is you have to have your tools, your technical tools, orchestration, etc. And you're dealing with the science of synchronization. But the basic thing is the philosophy of scoring. To me, it's and from what I've been told, it's basically about two things. It's about tension and release with different styles, but it's painting the psyche. The music is the soul of a film, and it does paint the psyche. Every great director, they need music to even cut their film. They can't cut their film because it's too plastic, and music gives it form and shape and soul. And Spielberg always says the music is the soul of his film, and it is, because you can. We used to do experiments with the Composers and Lyricists Guild, where Nathan Scott would bring in 2 minutes of Lassie running across a vacant lot in broad daylight. And no matter how many composers you get to do it, it's all different. It can be sinister, pastoral, comical, horny. It can do all of it. You can make it anything you want, comedic. And the music will paint, your psyche of how you perceive it. And that's amazing. It's an amazing process, though. I remember in Cold Blood, which is the one where I probably fell in the deepest because it was a nonfiction story. And Richard Brooks, as the director, they called me in before he even called the actors, because Bobby Blake was there already. But I told him about Scott Wilson because I just finished In the Heat of the Night, and he got Scott for that picture. And it was scary because these guys looked exactly like the Killers. And we'd been to Menninger Clinic, and they told us the psychology that the two of them were really punks, but together they formed a third person that was capable of really heinous kind of crimes. And I used like 12 cello and 8 basses, and it was really going against the technology in those days. And I said, Richard, if you want to do this effectively, you have to go out to the first-run theaters and check the sound. And I was on the way to Brazil. I didn't think he'd do it. He went to 65 theaters. Richard Brooks didn't play. And he fought for me like nobody in the world did, because Capote wanted Leonard Bernstein to do the score, and the studio did. Richard said, Quincy's doing the film. It's not a black film. And he said, he is doing the film. And I remember the night after it opened, I got this incredible call from Truman Capote, who I hadn't spoken to before. And he was almost in tears, apologizing for doubting it in the beginning. It's an amazing experience. But psychologically, that picture was, we saw a restoration here about 2 weeks ago. And it scared me to death because it's had more significance now than it ever did.
But there was also something you didn't mention in this past that I've heard you say before that's incredible, which is that unlike a live performance or recording session, the time of the film can't change.
That's true. Well, your biggest, if there's soul in science, the science of it is synchronization. And there's synchronization techniques, they can be click tracks, which is a tempo that's mechanical, because you punch holes in every 4 frames, every 24 frames in the film, and it makes a sound that gives you a tempo. Or you use what they call streamers, and they're streamers that go across the screen like that, and it has 2 punches at the end, so it gives you a preparatory streamer and downbeat on the clicks. I mean, that's how everybody works. It's all of the professional composers, they've got that down. And it's a question of trying to keep the emotion so that the emotion governs, and you have the science, and the synchronization is something that has to come into the picture, because sprockets do not lie, and they will not budge an inch for you. They don't flinch for you. You have to follow it, and you have to try to make an organic piece out of a cut from an interior close-up to an exterior long shot, a master shot.
Sinatra. What is there to say about your wedding with Frank?
I'm just glad I can keep him with me all the time. This is Sinatra's family
Let's just pick that
family
up.
crest.
He wears Sinatra's ring already on his hand.
Yes, okay.
So
Let me go
let's
down
just
to that.
start with that and hold it up for us, will you, Quincy? Hang on one sec.
Francis.
I want to get a critical focus on this.
And you're rolling, right?
Yeah.
In the words Francis used to always tell us, Q, live every day like it's your last, and one day you'll be right.
Okay, and tell me again, just being with him on the stage, any.
Well, here's what I think the most powerful emotion about him. I don't regret it, but I wouldn't dare allow myself to be vulnerable enough to believe that Frank cared for me the way he said he did, because he knew a lot of people, and I didn't really believe it when he was alive. But when I saw Tina's book, and I remember all of the nice things he did for me, for my son, for my daughter, which was 6 weeks old, and sent a bond to my son for education. You know, he has an image, you know, that doesn't reveal this part of him, because the toughness. He's a very sensitive guy, but I was almost with him up until the end, to the family, and I count my blessings, you know, to have been a part of, just be around when he was around, but to be a part of his life is, I think, a serious blessing, because I met him in 1958 in the south of France, and I heard from him 6 years later, and we worked together since then. From then, and I was able to be in, I think, a group with some of the finest arrangers, Nelson Riddle, Billy May, all these great writers, Don Costa, and Gordon Jenkins. I just feel very, very privileged and honored to have been on earth at that time and ready to take that call. Who was that timing? That's got to be Lisette.
You said something in Chicago that your father mentioned to you every day, that we shot in a dark room.
Yeah.
That just stuck with me. If you would just say it again,
Okay.
you know, and preface it by, if you just say, again, your mother wasn't around much. It was your father who was leading the way. And what was he trying to teach you with that saying he'd tell you every day?
Well, my brother and I, Lloyd, we never understood what the word mother meant. You know, it's still a concept to me. It's not something that's organic. But my father was always there, and he, as much as he worked, he always gave us this wisdom every day. He said to Lloyd and I, over and over, once a task has just begun, never leave it till it's done. Be the labor great or small, do it well or not at all. Always, over and over.